Around the world, disasters are on the increase. In the past 10 years, earthquakes, heat waves, floods, hurricanes, fires and volcanoes have killed over 1 million people, affected another 2 billion and caused $4.5 trillion of damage.
I just never saw that much water. This street was probably this high.
The first words I said was, oh my God, everybody's dead. Because there was nobody coming out.
Ito dati itong bahay namin. And then yun po ang nakawas out ng bahay namin.
Our homes are where we look for shelter, but when disaster strikes, we're on the front line. If you think your house is safe, think again.
The house was destroyed by the flood.
We're going to reveal the hidden risks and ask, is your home built to last?
Building codes are critically important to life safety and property protection.
The public, they need to be asking these questions of the builder. Why won't you build me a home that will survive?
It's either pay a little more now or pay a hell of a lot more later.
We're going to discover how you can make your home safer.
Disasters are not natural. Nature provides events, but we provide the vulnerabilities that take a natural event and make it into a disaster, or worse, a catastrophe.
Aris Papadopoulos, welcome.
Thank you.
So why did you want this documentary to be made? You're an old construction guy, right?
Yes.
I mean, it seems like odd bedfellow.
I spent my life building things, providing the materials for things. I was CEO 20 years. And I really got frustrated because I saw what we were doing wrong. I saw we have a systemic problem. I saw they were profiting by creating vulnerability. And I said, you know, I can't end my life this way. And by the way, I'm also a 9/11 survivor. So, you know, all these things kind of impacted me, and I said, you know, I'm going to early retire a couple of years ago. I've done well. And I really want to make resilience kind of my personal mission. So I started the nonprofit Resilience Action Fund. I wrote this book called Resilience, the Ultimate Sustainability, which some of you probably have read. And really its purpose was to communicate to the public, to the ordinary house owner, really what goes on in what we call the property and development business that affects everyone, but they really don't know what's happening inside the black box. And because not too many people read books, at some point someone told me, it was from the UN, says, why don't you make a documentary like Al Gore did? And I said, you know, that's a good idea, but unlike Al Gore, I'm not going to make a documentary about me. So I'm not in the documentary. In fact, I just have a 1-second cameo appearance there. It's really homeowners talking to homeowners with a sprinkle of experts in between. And we have some of these experts here. I think you saw Dr. Olson there. Julie from Smart Home America is there, and Mike Ronaldo from this group is
he's there.
And by the way, I want to thank Flash. I think you're doing an excellent job. Congratulations on the 10-year anniversary. Leslie, this is great. And I'm hearing so many things about consumer-driven resilience, which is really my personal passion. So I'll turn it back to you, because I could keep talking for the whole 15 minutes.
It makes it easy on me. Listen, you in the documentary, and I thought was fascinating was that you went to many different places, not just around the United States, but it's worldwide. And you see in there what's being done in places in Southeast Asia, in Europe, where the resilience movement, while it may be small, is actually underway.
And then you're exactly right. I think we're at the beginning of a movement similar to what we saw the green movement, the consumer safety movement for automobiles, the organic products movement. But I think the key to all these movements, right now we're still below the radar screen, the key to all these movements is creating consumer demand. And I heard a brilliant presentation just in one of these sessions from Paul Martin, and first time I heard him. Are you here, Paul? Yeah. I mean, it hit a home run for me personally, because from the builder side, let's be honest, and a lot of you have faced the opposition of the building industry, and I know you're very polite. You don't like to say home builders, oppose this and so forth, but they do. But the dilemma is this, because the builders look at raising the standards as a cost. It's not only a cost, it's less profit. And it's less profit because there's no revenue. And there's no revenue because the consumer doesn't value it. I mean, we value organic products. We're willing to pay 10, 15% more, or green products, and that's why people supply them to us. We need to do the same thing with resilience. We need to educate people to create that transparency so they value the more resilient home compared to the more vulnerable home. And we haven't done that yet.
And you were saying it's people are stuck in this, I want the Better Homes and Gardens home, but I don't really care so much that whether it's got hurricane straps. I mean, it's the aesthetics that they want.
Yeah, and unfortunately, what I'm hoping in the future to create is kind of a series of Built to Last, which I kind of have called the antidote to the home and garden TV, because unfortunately consumers have been brainwashed for decades that cosmetics is what creates value and brings, instant gratification, whereas the real value of your investment and your safety is based on the resilience. So it's priorities for us, and in fact, there's a couple that talks at the end of this documentary in Alabama that basically says, we'd prefer to be in a smaller home and be in a safer home. So let's not think always that we have to spend more. It's a question of what do we prioritize. If we can have a home that's 5% less and 50 to 100% stronger, what do we prefer to have?
Is the key to get, and we've been talking about this right along at this meeting, to get consumers educated to understand what should be important to them. And once they do that, then the builders will come along kicking and screaming one way or another,
Yeah.
if it's demanded by the consumers.
Yeah. And we had this discussion at that session yesterday afternoon, and one thing I pointed out was that I think the initial target for us should be the home buyers. There's about 9 million home buying transactions in this country every year, and we need to find a way to communicate with each one of them on what else they should be looking beside the countertops, the neighborhood, the closets, that they need to be asking questions: what's behind the wall, what's the elevation, what's the flood risk, what's the combustible risk of this property. So, educating the consumers at that stage, because from my perspective, 80% of the risk we take is when we buy the home. The other 20% for me is what we do to the home after that. So if we can get people every year making better decisions, then over 10 years, hopefully we'll get, a big part of the population.
How do you do that? How do you get people? Is it just continually driving the message home that, hey, this is what you should be concerned about?
Well, I think we've got to use every possible approach. I'd like to invite our weather friends that have a great audience and credibility with the public to talk about what should you look at when you're looking to buy a home. Not just what you need when the storm is coming, but what are the things you should pay attention to. Social media is another great avenue. I mean, most people, especially young people, look at Zillow today. How can we get the message out through Zillow, either through advertising or trying to get Zillow on board? I personally believe that Zillow is reluctant to do this because most of their revenue comes from the realtors, and from my perspective, the realtors don't want to complicate their sale. I mean, they don't want to bring risk and vulnerability too much into the discussion. So they're not incentivized, but we need to go directly to the public, which I heard in Rich Olson's talk. They're the voters too. So, if the public's convinced, the officials are paying more attention.
Right now, I guess instead of built to last, it's built to fail is the way it is today,
yeah.
Right? In the U.S., the economic losses from natural disasters are more than any place else in the world. So is built to fail even economically sustainable with the kind of numbers that we see out there for the cost of disasters?
Yeah, the U.S. is #1 in terms of economic losses in the whole world. in absolute numbers. And I think we're reaching the unsustainable point there. So I think we've exhausted, I mean, when they were kind of, 1 billion, 2 billion, we're a big economy, we could absorb that. But we're talking 50, 100, I think, in the future we're going to be talking $200 billion events. That's big money, that's serious money, and that's a serious impact on our economy. So I think, Washington is starting to wake up. I think FEMA is starting to think, well, we can't bear all this risk at the federal level, give it to the states. And we need to put the accountability really to the local level, because we have a system of fragmented codes here that essentially, the locals make the rules, but we want the federal government to pay the bill, and that's not sustainable. If you make the rules, you pay the price, okay? And that may change behavior too. So I see some changes kind of in the background, but I think the consumer side is the side that I would encourage, Flash and other groups, and I'm personally focused on that. I think that's where we can get, mileage. Let's continue the code and all that effort, but, consumer communication to me is going to be the turning point.
You had said something talking about earthquakes, and in the documentary that you addressed earthquake preparedness in several places, Indonesia or
Philippines,
the Philippines, and the work that's being done there. But you had said something to me that you felt actually safer in Greece than you do in the United States.
Yeah, I've been through 2 earthquakes in Greece in my life. I grew up there, and I have to say I feel safer in a building in Greece than I feel in California. And Greece has 1/6 the income per capita of California. So when I hear we can't afford it, I say, you can't afford it and Greece can afford it? How is that possible, So we have these perceptions of affordability that we use, I think, as alibi in our whole system of development to kind of, limit ourselves. But to me, it's an essential. I don't think you can call something sustainable or green unless it's, built to last. So I think we need to, get past this. You go to code hearings and the opposition will say, well, it's not going to be affordable. Well, guess what? We're already paying that price through losses. And unfortunately, the people paying the price are the people primarily in the lower economic income. So to me, it's also an equity issue, Keeping the standards so low traps a lot of people in what I call a poverty disaster cycle that they can't get out of.
How do you get the built-to-fail mentality corrected, especially within your old industry, the builders? Because when it's not an economic benefit to them to build to last, is it?
No, I mean, today it's not. And that's why we're building, I don't know, maybe close to 1 million homes a year right now in the U.S. I'd say 9% of them are going to fail, So yes, but we're falling, every year we're falling further behind. And the problem is until we get the value to the consumer to say, I want, and I think somebody mentioned this today, I said, unless the consumer says, I want a better home, I want a more resilient home, I want these features, and they hear it over and over again, and we see a differentiation in the value of a home. I like to tell people, I live in Miami. I moved there 15 or so years ago, and like 5 years ago, I bought a home on the west side of the Biscayne Bay, and I picked the location, which is like a mountain in Miami, 15 feet elevation. And I said, hey, you can buy, same price, something in 15 feet or 2 feet. So it's a bargain to get, a resilient location. But, the market doesn't differentiate. In fact, sometimes you pay more for the 2 feet elevation than you do for the 15. That's not going to, at some point the market's going to wake up. So resilient homes are going to appreciate more, and vulnerable homes are going to lose value. I think that is going to be the ultimate end of this. And
that'll be the selling point for somebody, that if you have a resilient home, your resale value is going to be far more than if you have one
exactly, yeah. And I think Fortified has done some studies, Smart Home America in Alabama, they're kind of starting to show that. So to me, that's the big sell point. You want to protect your investment and your life, you need to be above code. You need to be strong. You need to be fortified. Don't accept the code. Don't accept what the building industry is serving you.
Any questions from folks out here? Somebody have any questions at all? Yes.
The United States, the situation is the building departments come out and they look at the buildings. And they provide what are called inspections to the installation that's there. And the courts throughout the country have ruled that building inspectors, building departments are not responsible for those inspections that they're providing. And it falls to the architects and the engineers, and what we're providing by our contracts are observations. So we can limit the amount of responsibility that we have associated with the quality of the work that's supposed to be in compliance with all the details and all the research that's provided, which is wonderful, but it's the enforcement side of this from the inspectors, where our inspectors are not taking responsibility because they don't have to legally. And I don't know that this will ever change, but if building departments were held responsible for the quality of the inspection that their inspectors are providing, that might change the quality of the construction that you're talking about, where the consumer is actually realizing a much higher degree of quality for what it is they're paying.
Yeah, I have to say in the U.S., the quality of construction is generally good. The problem is the standard is low. So we're doing high quality construction to low standards most of the time. Interesting, I'll tell you something about Greece. And Greece doesn't have enforcement, there's corruption and so forth, but there's one thing that makes Greece resilient, and that's lifetime liability for the contractor and the engineer, and every house has to be signed for an engineer. So if there's an earthquake and a house fails, the first thing they do is look to find the engineer and the contractor and throw them in jail. Of course, they get bailed out, but they're going to be put on trial, and they're assumed guilty until proven innocent. Believe me, no contractor and engineer in Greece wants to, build something that is going to be cheap. If you as an owner ask for that, they say do it yourself. I don't want to have that lifetime liability. So there are different legal systems, and you don't have the enforcement, but you have something else that probably has more teeth. To me, it's like Hammurabi's law back in Babylon that said basically if the house falls, either you rebuild it, and if you kill somebody, it's your head too. I mean, it was performance based rather than specification based.
I have another question.
Yeah.
Very good. Aris Papadopoulos from University of Florida. I think you're, again, we know you're preaching to the choir here, and this is something that we have done for the last 2 decades here at Flash. My contention and question is this resilient. The benefit is not just to the individual homeowner, right? The benefit is to a resilient community. There is a difference in terms of who comes to the table when you make that argument, right? It works in Greece because you go there and the houses exist for 100 years and families exist. They pass them down and so on and so forth. Essentially, how do we raise the focus? It's not just like you're a bad person and you're a bad person and you're a bad person. No, it's all of us in this room. We have to actually become more social. We have to literally we are living together as a community. So how do we raise the resilience of our communities? It goes beyond just having good structural input into an individual house. It is about your infrastructure, it is about your social network, and again, it's about equity.
Yeah, I'm all for community resilience, but I think community resilience works better when you have the hardware already strong enough than when you don't. I think the error we're kind of making in a lot of circles is we're talking about community resilience almost as an alternative, as a substitute to basic hardware resilience, and that won't work. Talking to the choir is not the objective of this documentary. It's being shown by PBS. It's been shown in California and Florida, and hopefully more PBS station was rolled out late this summer. And it will be also subtitled or translated into other languages and shown around the world. And really what I hope to do, and I've kind of aired this with different people here, is hope to pull together something to create a built-to-last series that will kind of go around to different hazard areas, different parts of the world, and kind of, again, homeowners talking to homeowners, the antidote to the, HGTV, trend, in the world. So we can raise a little bit the conscious of, you know, your individual choices. You know, I think if we accumulate enough good individual choices, they will also create the basis for a resilient community.
We have time for one more quick question. Anybody have one more quick question? Anybody this side? Yep, back here.
Aris, I would ask, I guess, in your experience, if you view the builder as more of an obstacle, because I think logically it would be great if the builder became the advocate to educate the homeowner as a sales tool. Who do you think the message has to ultimately be delivered by that educates the kind of mass consumer? I mean, where does that message have to come from to get people to start asking the builder to build it to a higher standard?
Yeah, I don't want to give you the impression that, you know, I consider the builder to kind of be kind of this, you know, immoral obstacle. But really, we've created a system, let's say an economic system, that rewards the builder to do the wrong things. Okay, so if you're put into that system, you know, and you profit from building vulnerability, you're going to continue doing it as long as the law allows you to do it, and as long as a buyer is willing to buy it. So, you know, who's going to communicate this message? I think we all have to communicate this message. You know, the word of mouth. You know, yesterday we were saying that probably the biggest influence we have is word of mouth. You know, we trust probably our neighbors and, you know, our peers more than we trust kind of the experts and the officials these days. So, you know, my goal through a lot of this is really to get those people talking. And I was, you know, one thing that impressed me the most and I followed we filmed in the U.S. along the Oklahoma, Houston, Alabama, and Florida, and then we went to Philippines and the UK. Is when you ask people impromptu. I mean, you know, a lot of these interviews are not, you know, there's no prep. You kind of tell them generally and it's impromptu. How really well people communicate. And I invite you to see the whole documentary. It's available on Link TV, and I sent a Twitter with a link to it to your, conference site. You know, how really well they communicate. I mean, to me, they're the best salespeople are the ordinary homeowners that have lived through this experience and have changed their behaviors and are doing things differently. So to me, that's the power. How do we multiply that, you know? And we can multiply through, you know, the media system, you know? So, you know, encouraging television, you know, the weather stations, you know, public TV, internet, YouTube, whatever, you know, whatever works, you know, no limitation there. But instead of putting the experts talking, I'd put, you know, ordinary people talking, you know, because they're the best salespeople and they're the most credible.
I would urge all of you to go ahead and take a look at it. It's really a very, very well done documentary with a lot of great insights. Aris Papadopoulos, thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Thank you.